Welcome to Identified.
Family to me is community. You know, it's a lot of different people that come from a lot of different places who have a lot of different perspectives and ways of looking at things, and that being okay. I have a lot of friends who see the world very differently than I do, and I think that's okay. You know, it's not being in an echo chamber or understanding things only in one way, and only being around people who don't challenge you in that way. You know, that can be a bit dangerous if you're dealing with that, but some people like that, you know, which is fine. But if I could sum it, it would be, it's being around people who challenge you, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it really allows you to kind of find your identity in that way.
Hello, I'm Nabil Ayers, author, music executive, and host of Identified, the podcast that delves deep into the complex world of family and identity. In this episode, my guest is Ahmed Gallab, the musician behind Sinkane. Ahmed's first musical memory is of his grandfather chanting in a religious ceremony in Sudan. Years later, as a teenager in Ohio, Ahmed discovered his love of hardcore music and the importance of the hardcore community, which felt like a family to him. Stay tuned to learn how Ahmed's upbringing, from London to Sudan to Boston to Provo, Utah, informed his concept of family. Here's my conversation with Ahmed.
My mom's father was a very religious man, and he went into a madrasa to study Islam after the 6th grade. So he devoted his life to Islam, and, you know, as an adult, he had a mosque named after him in his hometown and became this very wealthy businessman who just kind of devoted himself to Islam. But because my family's Sufi, there's a lot of religious traditions that we would do in Sudan. One of them, of which is called the Mawlid, which is a religious ceremony that celebrates the life of the Prophet Muhammad. In a Mawlid in Sudan, there's all these like kind of rituals and pomp and circumstance to like get to this part where the elder clerics do this really beautiful and wonderful recitation of religious stories and of the hadith and of the Quran. And my grandfather was kind of at the core of those clerics who recite these stories, and it sounds like they're singing. They're reciting them in such a way that it sounds like they're singing. And there's this like back and forth call and response between the congregation and my grandfather and these two other guys who were reciting these stories. So as a kid, that was the first time I really heard, well, I was cognizant of hearing vocal, like singing sounding stuff. And it was really, really tantric and spiritual. And I would, you know, felt like I was like seeing things, you know.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. And soon after that, you know, as like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, like got into Sesame Street and like was obsessed with Sesame Street, got into pop music, just listening to it. And then in the 6th grade in particular, there was this time at recess where my friends were having this conversation, and I walked into this conversation and they were like, "Hey, Ahmed, we're going to start a band and you're going to be the drummer." So I was like, "Oh, okay, great." And I was like, I should probably go check out drums and see what they're all about. And I remember living in Provo, Utah, went to this place called Summer Haze Music in Provo, Utah. And I sat on a drum set and I started playing the drums, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is it. This is what I want to do. A year later, we played our first show. The moment the first show started, that was it. I was like, I'm committing the rest of my life to doing this.
That's amazing. And aside, I don't think I knew the Provo, Utah part. I went to high school in Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. Haven't thought about it since then. Yeah. Definitely went to high school with a girl named Melissa Summerhays. His parents owned a music store.
Oh, really?
I totally remember this.
Oh, my goodness.
This just came back. That is wild.
That's amazing. That was
has to be the same. I mean, yeah, small town, small state, whatever.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. So Utah. But you hadn't played an instrument yet? You'd just been very exposed to music.
No, I think before that, the only instrument I played, I think in the kindergarten, we had like a culture day where we were all...
In Provo?
No, this was in Boston. That would be interesting too. But it was in Boston when my family first emigrated to the United States. We had this big culture day. I went to like an international school. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to come dressed in our cultural attire. And we had this like big drum circle, and I was given spoons to play. And that was really fun.
Right.
So,
Which is a form of drums.
Yeah, exactly.
An early form, percussion.
Exactly.
So wait, give me the quick timeline. Sudan to Boston to Provo.
Okay, so actually the timeline is London, England. I was born in London.
Okay.
My dad was working for the Sudanese embassy in London. Moved back to Sudan. This is 1983 I was born. Moved back to Sudan about a year later. 1989, military coup overthrew the government of Sudan. My dad was in Boston on a fellowship program studying at Boston University. Family came. The coup happened while we were in Boston, so we applied for asylum, got asylum from the United States. A year later, moved to Provo because my dad decided to go back to grad school. So he was studying at BYU.
At BYU,
yeah.
Which has a huge international element to it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It was pretty wild. And then lived there till 1996, 1997, moved to Ohio. And Ohio's like where my whole musical world started. That's when, 8th grade, 9th grade, started a band, learned about Ohio music, got really into hardcore, moved to Columbus, developed that even more and more, and so on. Yeah.
And what's the family setup? You, your father?
Me and my father, my two younger sisters.
Younger sisters, your mother?
My mom, my mom too.
Okay.
Yeah, of
and
course.
so you grew up with the sort of nuclear family, I suppose.
Exactly.
A fairly normal family, but in I guess an abnormal way, moving to all those places. Like, was it hard to move a lot? Did you feel like you fit in or like you didn't fit in all these different cities?
I definitely didn't fit in at all. I mean, I was like, blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup. Like it was, the only black kid in my elementary school in Provo until my sister came to school. Although Provo is a pretty, multicultural place because of, LDS Church and the missionaries and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like Pacific Islander kids.
Yeah, from Tonga and Samoa, right?
Yep. And Asians and stuff, but no black people. On top of not being around people who look like me, I was like the only non-Mormon in school. So that was really intense. Then going to Ohio, it was a culture shock because there was a lot of black people in Ohio and a lot of black people in my school. It was like almost 50% black. But I did not fit in with them and I didn't fit in with the rest of the kids. And it was very, very like much told to me by everybody.
Right. So was that sort of like because you didn't have, I guess, sort of a more traditional American black experience?
Yes,
even though you're black, you were coming from... Yeah,
I don't talk like them. I don't dress like them. I don't listen to the same music. I don't act the same way. I'm African. I'm not really black. I was actually told that one time. And then in the meantime, in in the summer holidays, my mom and my sisters would go back to Sudan. And it was the same thing in Sudan. It was like, oh, you're not like us. You're not quite Sudanese. You got out of here. Like, why are you even here? Kind of thing. So always having this understanding that I'm different or feeling foreign in a foreign land kind of thing.
Yeah. Did your accent change as a kid? Do you know? You might not have noticed, but I wonder if moving, London, all these places, if that changed.
No, I don't think my accent changed, but I think I developed an understanding of code switching, which was interesting and kind of feels embarrassing at sometimes where like if I'm around other Sudanese people, communicating with them in Arabic and in English, my English accent changes. Or if I'm in a group of all black kids, like the way I kind of like communicate changes quite a bit.
Yeah.
Or being in Sudan, like everything changes, my whole demeanor and everything kind of changes.
Yeah. How far back can you go in your ancestry? Do you know much about several generations back? Did you know your grandparents, great-grandparents as a kid?
I knew my grandparents. One interesting custom in Sudan is lineage is very important. And the way that you can trace it back in a very like surface level way is understanding your middle name is your father's first name. So me and my sisters, our middle name is Abdullahi, which is my father's first name.
Oh, that's same middle name.
Exactly. So his middle name is his father's first name, and so on and so forth and so forth. So some people will try to memorize all of the middle names to understand the connection of their family. Right. So like sometimes my name in Sudan is written as my first name, my father's name, his father's name, his father's name, his father's name, his father's, and then my last name.
Oh, wow.
Especially on my father's side. My mom's side of the family is really big as well, but on my father's side, the extended family is really, really big. And I remember going back one time and we were all at a picnic and everything was great. And then everyone got silent and they said to me, name everybody. Okay, now you name everyone. Name their parents. Okay, name their grandparents. It's really important for people to like really understand that. So that said, it was really hard for me because I was disconnected from everyone. I didn't really have a relationship with my extended family at all, except for the 3 months out of the year that I'd go back to Sudan. So I know my grandparents, not on my dad's side, because my grandma died before I was born and his dad died while we were in the United States. So I didn't really know him that well. But on my mom's side of the family, I know everybody. And she's one of 9 and everyone has 2 to 3 kids. And in Sudan, it's a customary to marry within the family. So like a lot of cousins are marrying cousins and stuff like that. Oh. So those families live really close to each other. Mm-hmm. So one of 9 with everyone married, you have a lot of grandparents, right. And a lot of extended family. And it's pretty overwhelming, but it's pretty kind of cool.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Is there a lot of music in the ancestry that you know of, or is there any? I
think so. I think my grandfather, who I was telling you about the Sufi stuff, I think he, in his heart, was a singer, was a musician, but and he justified being able to do that through religion. He was really adamant that his kids did not pursue music, but he was a lover of music. My mom played guitar. My father's mother was a poet, and a few of my cousins have really great singing voices, but no one ever pursued it. No one ever really went into it until I did.
Yeah. I'm always curious, and I have my own feelings on it, but you've been Sinkane for 15 years, right? So is there a familial aspect to being in the band or being in a band?
I think so. Mm-hmm. More so, though, is the musical community. Because I grew up with such an extended family, every time I'd go back to Sudan, I didn't only, like my family lived in a compound, like a big, gigantic compound. Whenever my mom and her siblings would get married, her dad would build them a house.
But like on the same lot?
This huge blocks worth of houses. When my cousins got married, their parents, my mom's siblings, would build a house on top of their house. So it just became this like giant like community of people. Yeah. And that's just the immediate like connection, and then the immediate extended family, and then the other people in the neighborhood who are part of our family too. So I grew up knowing everyone on the block, mm-hmm. or everyone for like a 3-mile radius. I just knew people like that. So when I first started playing music, I got into the punk and hardcore scene. That's what it felt like to me. Mm-hmm. And it was really important for me to be involved in that community and kind of play a role in that community because it felt like family to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The members have changed in your band over the years, right? And does that feel like, do you stay in touch with people who used to be in the band, or is it not that much of a thing?
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that is the good and the bad that kind of comes with that. The Sudanese culture is really an amazing culture, and it's very generous and hospitable, but there's a lot of weird stuff that, kind of exists in that kind of culture that I didn't really know affected me and my like understanding of family until I started Sinkane, and I realized how inherent they are in my behavior. So there's a lot of people that have come and gone for good or bad reasons or whatever. But I feel glad that I've been able to maintain all the relationships.
Yeah. I'm curious, are there traditions? I mean, obviously lived all over the place internationally. Now you're here, married to an American woman who I'm friends with. Yeah. Are there traditions that you've taken from childhood, or traditions that existed that are still part of your family, or things that you don't include that you wish you still could?
In music, you mean?
No, more in life, meaning holidays, dinners, sort of rituals, things like that. Yeah.
Sudanese culture is really kind of religion is woven into the fabric of the culture pretty strongly. So like things like Ramadan is really important. I traditionally fast during Ramadan. I think outside of the religious aspect, because I try to, the religious stuff is, kind of controversial to some degree. Sudanese culture is very hospitable. Community and kind of this extroverted way of communicating with people is kind of reigns supreme. I really like to be around a lot of people, and that kind of tradition of like gathering a lot of people together and doing things together is really important to me. So I like to try to do that as much as possible.
Has there been much trauma in your family that you've had to sort of deal with?
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing about the culture that's really frustrating is a lot of people don't talk about the things that might seem bad, and because of that, solutions haven't been presented. Mental health is a really big thing. Death is inherent in every culture. And the way people in Sudan deal with death is actually a pretty beautiful experience. It brings a lot of people together. First and foremost, when someone passes, within 24 hours, they need to be buried, and that part of the experience needs to be complete. But what happens is the grieving process ends up lasting quite a long time. But what it is it brings a lot of people to the person who is dealing with it, right, as support. And it's very overwhelming in the best way. When my father's father passed away, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, there were people at the house every single day, offering their support, showing love, distracting to some degree, right, to like kind of get him to start the process of moving on, and it was really wonderful to see how quickly it happens, And in Sudan, because it's so inherent to the culture, you're always going to see people, because it gets to the point in your life where like you're dealing with it all the time.
Right.
Your community. Yeah. So it connects people to one another in this really wonderful way.
Yeah. What is family to you?
Family to me is community. It's a lot of different people that come from a lot of different places who have a lot of different perspectives and ways of looking at things, and that being okay. I have a lot of friends who see the world very differently than I do, and I think that's okay. It's not being in an echo chamber or understanding things only in one way, and only being around people who don't challenge you in that way. That can be a bit dangerous if you're dealing with that, but some people like that, which is fine. But if I could sum it, it would be, it's being around people who challenge you, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. I think it really allows you to kind of find your identity in that way.
Thanks for tuning in. Please consider subscribing to Identified wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And be sure to check out Identified on YouTube and identifiedpod.com, where you can watch videos from our interviews. Our executive producer is Kieron Banerji, and the show is produced by Palm Tree Island. The music for Identified is by Noella and Patricia Brennan. I'm Nabil Ayers. Thanks for tuning in.